Bonk. Alright, we're recording now. Yippee! Welcome once again to the soccer tournament Reeving series. Part 2.1. 2.1 being we're breaking into battle game Reeving now. Yippee. Today we and current attendance is myself. We have Sid, we have Fert, we got Jay from Darkwater, we got Cruel Soul, we got Rain of Few Forks, and we have Rook. Um, so for today's class, just to give a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about, we're going to cover the differences between reaving 1v1s versus large fields, because, these battle games you're going to be reaving a lot more large skill combat. How to properly call for holds, safeties, and emergencies, pre-game safety things. We're going to take a brief look at the armor section, and we're going to talk about different stoppages of play. So as we're going over hold, safeties, and emergencies, stoppages of play such as for scoring points, for rules clarifications, end of games, and half times. So this is going to be a lot more of the large scale reaving of a battle game versus when we start getting into nitty gritty, how spells work, how abilities work. Those will be at a later date. But for now, we're just going to be talking about general, alright, when you have a big group of people on the field, what the heck do? So the first thing we're going to talk about is, obviously, you're going to be reaving on a bigger scale than in tournaments. Because in tournaments, typically you're only reaving 2 people at a time. You're only watching, at most, 4 swords swinging in action. On a big scale battlefield, you're going to be seeing, easily, double, triple, quadruple that amount of people. Because, let's say you're at a small park like a Shire or a Barony. Alright, you might just have, 3-on-3s or maybe, 5v5s. But if you're at a park like my home park of Falling Fire, you're going to be seeing, average battlefields where it's, 15, 10-on-10, 15-on-15. Some weeks when everyone's, actually out in full force and we got visitors, sometimes 20-on-20. Especially when you're getting towards Kingdom Fields, where there's gonna be, at minimum most of the time, 20-on-20 or 30-on-30. As the scale of a battlefield goes up, you're gonna have to keep in mind that you're not going to see every single thing and every single shot and every single spell that happens on a battlefield. So, your reaving mindset has to change. You can't just be watching one singular encounter on the field. You have to kind of keep a bird's eye view of everything that's going on. So, as compared to when you're in a tournament and watching 2 people fighting one-on-one, obviously you have specific things you're going to be looking for, oh, is this person getting hit on the shoulder or are they actually catching the shot with their board? When you're looking at a large-scale battle, there's going to be different things you're looking for. For example, if you notice specific players are maybe using abilities incorrectly or being problematic, and you notice it, obviously point it out and correct them. But you're not necessarily only going to watch one specific player for the entire game, because it's not like we're going to have one Reeve for every player. You're not even going to have one Reeve for every 2 players. A lot of the time, you're going to be reaving a field of 20 people, or 20 plus people, with 2 to 3 Reeves. Obviously, you're not going to see every single exchange that happens. So some of the most important things to keep in mind are just keeping the general flow of the game going, making sure the rules are being followed, and making sure that when there are safety issues, that those are being addressed as efficiently and as quickly and safely as possible. So, this is where we break into the section where you're calling things such as holds, which we do in Neverwinter, but is not technically in the rules of play, safeties, and emergencies. So, oftentimes there will be situations where, let's say, a player falls or they get hit in a weird spot and they might be potentially injured, or at least at bare minimum they're stunned for a minute and they need to be out of combat for a moment to recover. These are situations that may on occasion require stoppage of play. In situations where it's just kind of a small, local, concentrated area where it's alright, walk around this person, let them recuperate, let them at least, walk to, an area where they're away from direct line of combat. You may resume fighting, but just be away from this person. Which happens a lot. Like, let's say someone gets hit in the nuts. It's like, all right, obviously this person is not injured to the point where they're gonna die, but they got hit in a really uncomfortable spot, so they need a second to recuperate. You don't need to call an emergency for that. That's where you might just call like a local hold, or just direct people to move away from this fighter and resume fighting like 10 feet away. Per the safety rules and combat etiquette in Section 5, it's necessary to notify nearby players of a safety situation which recognizes them to stop play. Then the player recognizing the situation should announce loudly, "Safety," to get the attention of nearby players and direct them away from the situation. So, it is fine for any player to call a safety or any Reeve if they are concerned for another player's safety, because safety comes first. So, for example, if I'm fighting in a game with Rook and he gets hit on the head really hard, and like he's okay and doesn't need medical attention but needs a second to recuperate, I might stand next to him and call, "Safety, back away 10 feet. So that does not mean that everyone has to stop fighting. That just means that realistically anyone within 10 feet should stop fighting, back away, and resume play outside of 10 feet. In situations where the entire field needs to stop, that's when you pull out the big E word, emergency. So, for instance, let's say in some drastic situation, there's like a bridge battle. Someone falls, some combination of things happens, they end up breaking their leg. That's definitely a situation where you would shout emergency, because you don't want people accidentally aggravating that or making it worse. In which case, play would be stopped and everyone would stop moving until the emergency incident has been resolved. Which you will see in Neverwinter that sometimes we have the issue of yelling hold, which doesn't necessarily clarify, oh, is this just I need to pause in this immediate area? Do I have to stop? Does the entire field have to stop moving? Which is why the ROP suggests the rules of safety versus emergency with that clarification. Because, of course, if I'm yelling safety, it's like, all right, cool, back away. If I'm yelling emergency, that automatically should get everyone's ears to perk up and they go, hey, yo, what's happening? I need to stop moving, make sure that whoever is in this emergency situation is okay. So that is an important thing to note of when you are calling for a pause in play. There are many other situations in which you would call for a pause of play as a Reeve, unrelated to safety. Obviously, this is the most important reason. However, realistically, if you're looking at Section 4, it is important to keep this in mind. Under no circumstances should a player attempt to stop the field of play because one person has become injured unless it is necessary to provide safety for the injured player. So, just keep in mind, like, alright, if I am playing on a field and my friend next to me gets hit in the nuts, it's like, alright, cool, back away from them, maybe call a small safety if they actually, like, are stuck there and can't move and can't fight, call a safety for a 10-foot area, but don't stop the entire field just because someone in one part of the field got hit in the nuts. That's leave this guy alone. He's recuperating. He's not feeling great. Let him relax for a second. Other instances where you would need a pause of time. Let me pull up the there is totally like a section that describes this perfectly well, but while I'm looking for that, other situations where you might need to stop play would be, for example, like stopping a person in a small area for a rules clarification. So on this big field, let's say you're seeing someone use an ability incorrectly, or maybe they're swinging unsafely. You're not going to stop play for the entire field, but you might stop play for that player and go, like, all right, hey, Rain, get over here. Hey, Rain, I know you're trying to, like, cast heal. That's not how the healing can't goes anymore. They changed the rules. I know it's kind of lame. It's just the white light of healing have healed thee now. It's not the old funny incant. So sorry, buddy, just to give you a quick clarification. And real quick, Fert sent a message in the chat. Several holds followed by medic have been used in escalation and other foam fighting sports, which is a really good method because, like, realistically speaking, if someone is like, you know, I got hit in the nuts, I don't need medical attention. Okay, cool. Versus, oh my god, I broke my leg. All right, hold, medic, because obviously they need medical attention. Um, and one important thing pre-game is, of course, making sure you have people set up nearby that can help in those emergency situations, whether it's someone who knows first aid, someone who has first aid on speed dial, hydration being nearby, because we live in Florida, people get overheated so fast. So one of the biggest safety concerns we have half the time is people getting overheated and like passing out on the field. Because that is scary. Because it's really common in Florida, and we forget how common it is sometimes. But then, as the summer months are creeping in, you're gonna see it become really apparent, especially at end rain in August, because it's gonna be blazingly hot and it's gonna suck, and people are gonna be bringing out their cooling towels and their fans because it's gonna be toasty and everyone's gonna be wearing armor. It's gonna suck. Would weather emergencies fall under a hold call? Yes. That's actually a really common one, especially in the summer months, because it is advised that, like, if we're playing and it starts thundering within like a certain distance, then it is advised that we stop play until weather subsides. If there's stuff like tornado warnings or tornado watches, then yeah, we should probably stop playing and head inside for shelter. People will often call games or even full park days because of weather conditions, because at Falling Fire we have this issue like all the time because we're on the bay. Yeah, and also I'm in Miami. Like, during hurricane season, it's like, awesome, we're rained out like 2 to 3 weeks out of the month. Yay! Yippee! Um, but yeah, having hydro medic with the walkie-talkies and then at least one Herald/Reeve with the walkie on the field has really helped in the past. And that's definitely something we need to implement more of in the future, now that we have access to more walkie-talkies too. Making sure at least one person on the game field has a walkie-talkie at all times. Because realistically, if for some godforsaken reason the medcrat isn't immediately nearby and you can't communicate with them, then someone's gotta run all the way over and find the medcrat, or find someone with a walkie-talkie to go, hey, we need the medcrat on the field. Meanwhile, someone's on the field and they're like, oh my god, my bone is sticking out of my body. No! So the biggest thing is like making sure you're understanding the differences in these stoppages of play, because safety is like one of the biggest, like, all right, cool. We all know when to generally stop playing if someone is hurt. But then you also have to keep in mind stopping play if players are just playing the game wrong. And yeah, Sid, if you want to say something, go ahead.
Well, the difference you might want to keep in mind for stoppages of play is that if it's not readily apparent whether or not the situation would warrant either an emergency medic call or simply just somebody taking a fucking arrow to the nuts, it's best. This also will vary if you're also the head Reeve on the field or just a secondary Reeve or an objective Reeve, score counter, etc. Go in, check on the person, see how they're doing, see what's going on. They're not allowed to be struck, and if they get struck or if somebody gets close to them, you tell them to get the fuck away. There's plenty of things that you can do, and understand that as a Reeve, your word is law out there. So just if, for instance, and this happens quite a bit, let's say somebody hits somebody in the face with an arrow. Traditionally, that doesn't require a hold. That person just steps away, and the Reeve, and they'll normally stand near the Reeve, or the Reeve will stand near them or over them, and then play can continue, whatever. It's understanding that as a Reeve, that you need to go and first investigate these kinds of situations the moment that it happens, so that you can go evaluate the situation, make sure what kind of stoppages is going to be. Is this just a basic safety? Is this a local hold? So like maybe the 3 or 4 people in this one engagement, or is this something I need to get the medcrat out? Now that means if I have to get the medcrat or head Reeve or everyone else involved, then that's at that point a full-on hold of field. So as a Reeve, keep that going in the back of your head. Get in there, see what's going on, evaluate, and then make the decision. Back to you, Leo.
And then, for terms of like smaller stoppages of play, when you're reaving on a big field, like, assuming like, these are stoppages of play for like people just playing the game wrong. That happens. For example, if someone's just using their ability wrong, it's really easy to just call them over and say, by the way, that's not how the incantation goes. This is how the incantation works. Or this is how the spell works. Like maybe they got shoved by someone else and they ran like 40 feet away instead of 20 feet. It's just like, by the way, for the future, it's only 20 feet. You don't have to stop play for that, but you could just let them know. So that way next time they go, oh, okay, cool. Or when someone gets hit with an ice ball and they stay frozen for like 2 minutes instead of 60 seconds. Just like, hey, by the way, it's only 60 seconds. Like, you don't have to stay there for that long. Oh, okay, my bad, thank you. These things happen all the time, especially with newer players who aren't as familiar with the rules. Or sometimes maybe you just haven't played against a specific thing before and you don't know how it works. Or maybe you just haven't played in a hot minute. Yeah. Or situations where, let's say, a person is like running around with the flag and capture the flag and they die, and then they keep running a couple extra feet and then they go, oh wait, I died. Maybe telling them, all right, reset the flag back at like an extra 5 feet for those extra steps you took when you were supposed to be dead. All right, cool. Those are things that can be resolved really quickly and simply. But in other situations where, let's say, someone's on the field and they're swinging a little recklessly, you can pull them to the side and let them know, hey, I noticed like you're swinging kind of hard, or you're swinging kind of recklessly, or you're like trying to 12-6 someone with your greatsword. Don't do that. I'm going to be keeping an eye on you to make sure you're playing safe. That's a stoppage of play for one specific person versus a whole field. Because you're going to have to be keeping an eye out on a larger area. So making sure that when you're stopping play for things like rules clarifications or individual players, keeping it quick so you can go back to giving the field your attention. Because if, let's say, you're trying to clarify like a tiny little spell, like someone said, all right, I'm going to go cast Suppress Aura on you. And then they said it wrong and they're arguing about whether they were in 50 feet or not, yada, yada, yada. All right, cool. You could clarify that real quick, but don't divert so much of your attention that you're now not noticing someone like got clobbered in the head like 20 feet away and is on the floor. You're going to have your head on a swivel. It is important to make sure that you're keeping the flow of the game going, and also that you're keeping your Reeving flow going, because otherwise that's how you end up with bad situations where things go unnoticed and safety issues can occur. So that's very important. So that's kind of a lot of the differences between Reeving individual 1v1 versus a big field, because obviously not every individual person is going to have your undivided attention when you're dividing your attention between like 20 people now versus just 2. So that'll be something really important to keep in mind. Another thing that's really important as a Reeve or as anyone who's running games when you're doing battle game Reeving is keeping an eye out before a game for potential hazards and making sure that the game itself is going to be run as safe as possible. In Florida, we have the issue of it is too damn hot all the time. So in Florida, you're going to want to make sure like, hey, am I putting my field out in the middle of the sun? Maybe I should have water nearby. Or is there a way that I could at least put like pockets of shade on this field? Like, am I playing in an area that at least has partial coverage? Or am I just going to have to say, all right, guys, there's no trees. We have to play in this big field, but there's water stations on each end and there's a water station in the middle? Awesome. Make sure you have your waters with you beforehand and maybe leave them at your spawns. That way you can hydrate in between. Letting people know these things ahead of time, because let's be real, sometimes we forget. You have adrenaline running and you forget that like, oh my gosh, I haven't drank water in this entire 20-minute long siege. Maybe I should do that. Making sure that you have the resources available for people to keep themselves safe to prevent situations where someone passes out from heat exhaustion. Other good pre-game prep is like, looking at, are there like big potholes in the field? Is there a massive ant mound? Maybe I'm going to mark that with cones so people don't step their whole foot into this hole and like shatter their vertebrae because they just took a dunk down a like giant hole. Also another great thing that Chewy mentioned in the chat, it is a really good idea to consider the length of games depending on the weather, because, having an hour-long battle into maybe like 3 20-minute battles or 2 30-minute ones, having breaks in the middle so that way people can, take a minute to hydrate and also just cool down a bit rather than running around for one uninterrupted hour in the Florida heat. And also, Cam, to answer your question, Reeves have had whistles in the past. I know that there are some people who carry whistles. And I know a couple people have carried like the big whistles, where it helps, especially when you're trying to get everyone's attention. Sometimes yell and be helpful, but sometimes people whistle too much, and then they'll whistle at like hey, blows whistle, you casted break concentration wrong. Then when you're blowing a whistle for an emergency, people are like, ah, well, they might be blowing the whistle just because someone casted like shove over there wrong. What a bozo. Oh my gosh, why is that person leaking from their head? So yeah, like Fert said, whistle overload can be a thing. Um but yeah, cones won't do much if players will ignore a full person over the hole and still crash into it. Yeah, that's true. And there's some situations where having a cone is not as good as having like, an actual like barricade there. Um because like one issue is that sometimes we do bridge games on actual bridges. Like in Rising Winds, there was an event where they had their field had multiple wooden bridges, and it's like, hey, guys, be careful because it's still like an actual wooden bridge. This might break. Who knows? So making sure everyone's aware of hazards beforehand, because like I will say sometimes fields have random terrain things that people aren't aware of, especially if they're visitors. As a field reeve, you should always be like, hey guys, reminder, there's these things on the field, and also we don't necessarily rake the field beforehand, so if there's something sharp, we wouldn't really know unless someone discovered it. Please keep an eye out when you drop to your knees in the game. But yeah, that's something that's really important to set up prior to playing the game, because obviously, in the middle of a game, if there's like a big hazard, it's more difficult to put down cones. You always can. That's what you call like the stoppage for, where you tell everyone to hold, and then you go, all right, guys, we have learned that there is like a humongous ant mound right here. Don't step on it. I'm marking it with cones. Run around it at your own risk. Smile. But it's still good to just do a scan of your field beforehand to make sure that everyone's going to be safe on your field that you're having these big battle games on. And of course, some of the last times you will call for stoppages in a game versus like, random terrain occurrences, things like discovering broken things on the field, or like insert other occasion here, like safety issues. If you hear, like, for example, someone's sword snap, if you start hearing weapons that might become damaged or seeing damaged equipment on the field, you might not stop the whole game for that. But if you hear like a kind of nasty crack, you're going to be like, all right, which one of y'all just had your sword snap in half? You might call a pause in that local area, so that way you can be like, all right, let's double check these swords real quick. Because I have, in fact, seen mid-battle game two people swing their swords at each other, and it literally just snap in half. And it's like, oh, well, give me a second. I'm going to go throw this off the field and grab a different sword. That happens so commonly, especially also with arrows. Like, let's say you're looking around a big battle game field, and someone's arrow got stepped on, and it looks kind of messed up. It's like, all right, cool. I might, as a Reeve, or what you should do as a Reeve, not might, what you should do as a Reeve, is when that weapon starts looking unsafe, remove it from the field. So someone shoots an arrow, the knock comes off, or like the fletching becomes uneven, so it only has like one thing of fletching versus the 3 that it had originally. Okay, let me take that off the field. And then when the player comes over, they're like, why do you have my arrow? Your arrow is messed up right now. I'm sorry, buddy. Removing unsafe equipment is always very important, especially if like it becomes unsafe on the field, because it might go into a game safe and then become unsafe as the game progresses forward. And then kind of the last one of the last big instances of which you would call a stoppage of play would be for things that are like in-game mechanics. For example, like scoring points, halftime in a game, calling or the end of the game, having your team switch sides, or ending the game overall. So, for example, like if let's say you have a point that's on a 5-minute timer, and the points for it get totaled every like 5 minutes for it, your game's 30 minutes long. Cool. What I might do is I might just go, hey, all right, we've hit the 5-minute mark, quick 10-second pause, take a quick breather. This is how the points are shaking up. And then 3, 2, 1, lay on. Cool. It doesn't necessarily have to be super long of a pause. let's say I have a 30-minute game where we're stopping at halftime at 15 minutes. Once I hit the 15-minute mark, I might yell, all right, time, we're going to halftime. We're switching sides. Everyone gets like a quick 2-minute breather. They hydrate, they switch sides, then we lay back on again. Versus the end of a game where obviously I'm not necessarily pausing the game. I'm just straight up stopping the game. Where I yell, time, that's the end of the game. Everyone collect everyone's projectiles, bring them back to the field, be nice, pick up people's stuff. Hydrate, get water in you, cool off. Let people know when the next game is happening. So those will be a lot of the big instances of which you have to stop the game as a Reeve. Which in battle games, I feel like happens a lot more often than in tournaments, because in tournaments, you kind of want to keep the flow going until the whole thing is done. The only time you'll really stop a fight and bring it to an abrupt pause is when there's an injury, or... No, honestly, it's kind of just that, because if people are having, like, an issue with trying to sort out, like, oh, who hit who when it's taking a certain amount of time, it's like, all right, if y'all are going to keep arguing about this, you can argue about it in the back of the line. Get the heck out. But obviously in a battle game, it's like, all right, you're clarifying something real quick, and then you're sending people back on their merry way to continue fighting for another, like, 30 minutes. So yeah, I don't know if anyone has any questions before continue yapping about other points. I see Rain typing. Can you talk about when it's appropriate to give a touch and go? Yes, that is actually a fantastic question. So, oftentimes in our games, we have respawn time, especially in battle games. We have respawn times that are like anywhere from 30 seconds, not 30 minutes, Jesus Christ, 30 seconds to like 60 seconds, upwards of like 90. So there are some times where, let's say, someone is having a rules clarification, and I have two players that are talking about a weird exchange. Maybe I called a player dead because of XYZ thing. And they're having a clarification with someone else. As a Reeve, let's say I've already clarified the situation, and we're all got it sorted out. At this point, they've been sitting out of the game for maybe longer than their respawn time might even be. So I might say, okay, cool. You go ahead and get a touch and go respawn. So if, let's say, like, Cidolfus is running at Rain. They, Rain, like, I'm trying to think of a good way to word this. There's so many different scenarios of which this could happen.
Can I give an easy one? Can I give an easy one for it?
Yes.
Eso es lo que dice, que lo mande ahí.
Sí, yo lo mando ahora.
Eso lo tiene que poner.
This guy.
Sorry.
I'm kidding.
So the easy answer is that, so for instance, a situation that would create a stop of play where one player is either a friend or like, I guess screwed over in a way that would probably have caused an impact. So let's say, for instance, I'm playing Barbarian and Rain throws an ice ball at me. Or some sort of effect that would not have affected me otherwise.
Maíto, eso no va.
No sé. Quita eso. The idea here is that a situation with which one player is affronted by another in a way that would, or that's done directly, then the Reeve may say, hey, don't worry about that. Go take a touch and go. So, like, for instance, if it was either by some level of like unclarification of rules or some sort of poorly made play by one player onto another, like a charge or something like that, because it also gives them the means to take a rest in exchange for tempo. You always don't have to do that. Sometimes it's just better to just say, hey, you could stick around here for a second, catch your bearings, go, or do some sort of reset for both fighters in order that both situations ends up being as fair as humanly possible. The problem with giving touch and goes away is that it depends on how key that play is to the actual continuing of the game. So if it's a play that would have ended the game, going touch and go is going to extend the game further. If it's going to be something that's relatively low impact in a much larger field, giving that touch and go isn't really so much of a problem. So be really careful when you're doing it. Make sure that something that could be done is like a stop playing, like a jump ball, is equally just as applicable in your repertoire as a touch and go. So, just keep that in mind. Sorry about that, guys.
And then, like Rain said in the chat, like, all right, one time Ezron took a nasty headshot and needed a break. I just wanted to get a touch to go when he gets back in the game. That's also a very good instance of when to do that, because obviously, like, this player, like, let's say they took a shot to the nuts once again, and they're taking a moment to recuperate. It's like, okay, you're like, obviously you're dead, but you took a hard hit. Once you're able to go back to spawn and respawn, just take a touch and go. Don't worry about the 30-second count. All right, cool. Or if someone takes a nasty headshot and they gotta pause, realistically speaking, like if someone took a headshot and they're taking the time to recuperate from it anyways, a solid amount of the time, they've probably already waited the length of their respawn anyways, half the time. So giving them a touch and go obviously is fine, but a lot of the time it kind of evens out to how much time they would have spent if they had just died anyways. So it doesn't really have that huge of an impact on the situation. But yeah. Also, Fert mentioned people will normally ask at the end of a round if it constitutes a refresh or not. Ultimately, like that's something that's more up to the person running the game in terms of like the person who designed the game and the head reeve in terms of like how they want the game to run. For example, if it's a really long siege where you want people to practice conserving their spells and making like lists that can spell lists that are replenishable, then maybe you won't give a refresh when people switch sides depending on how long it's been. Because for example, if we pull up in like the ROP, how and when refresh abilities are returned to full uses in class games, this should be none every 30 minutes. Like this could be no refreshes at all every 30 minutes when teams rotate, when a point is scored, or something else. They should be infrequent in order to encourage players to use their per refresh abilities tactfully and thoughtfully. Because let's say we're playing like a 20-minute game and it's like, cool, at 10 minutes we switch sides, but we get a refresh in between. I'm just gonna I'm not even gonna try to conserve my per refresh spells if I know that that's the case. Because they're effectively per lives with the amount of them I'm gonna take instead. And let's say I made them chargeable, but like if I'm playing like a dervish bard and I have 12 terrors and I use like one a minute and maybe a bit more, then I'm going to expend all of them, and then we're going to switch sides, and then I'm going to, awesome, cool, I have all 12 of my terrors back, yippee. Refreshes are actually like really big game changers for how people will design their lists, especially when they know they're going to get it more often. So that's something that's going to be kind of more up to the game designer and the head reeve. So that's kind of a big difference between just being like a field reeve on a battle game versus the person running the game. Yeah, Dervish only break con is correct if only break con didn't have a limit anymore. It technically does, but you just get 8 per life now, so it's fine. It has an air quote limit. Yeah, honestly, going over that was a lot faster than I anticipated, so I'm sure I could talk about more things, but that was kind of everything I had planned for today's class because I thought that would take me a lot longer to yap about.
There's a few things there that we can still touch if you want.
Go for
if
it.
you don't mind.
I was going to
So-
say there's also something totally uninvited that I can share when you're done with that.
Yes. Yeah.
If you want to, Sam, I've already yapped enough.
Yes, Sam.
You read first.
You go first. Take the floor.
I think something that you were talking about or touching on is Florida in general and the problems that just come freely here, and some things that I think we don't give enough consideration to in addition to everything you mentioned. One, hydration does not most come from fluid, and we make that mistake a lot. People gorge themselves with water and Powerade and Gatorade, and all for the sake of hydration, but those foods are not, or sorry, those drinks are not as hydrating or as long lasting with hydration as things like watermelon, fruit of any kind, honestly. Lettuce, water-filled vegetables or fruits are slow to absorb into the body, but keep you hydrated longer. And so encouraging people to hydrate is a bigger discussion than what we give as a populace. We always say, oh, hydrate, drink water, drink plenty of fluids leading up to the event. And yes, you should absolutely do that. But like, you have to do it with a sustainable source as well, one that's going to help maintain your body longer. The other obstacle that we see a lot, at least at our field at Falling Fire, is just how much sand is there. You know, it is so easy to roll your ankle or have an injury. We, a few years ago, had someone come out and they had to go to the emergency room because they had thrown their knee out of place sliding in a tournament because it was a poorly placed tournament in a sand pit, and their body couldn't take where it landed. And I don't know that mine could have either. So just some things to, you know, really think about if you're going to be running games, especially like major tournaments or places where you're going to be in sun because you don't get a choice. Just, you know, different forms of hydration, and maybe even do like a small class with your park and say, hey, these are the effective ways to best hydrate your body. These are the things that you can do to help protect yourself. And if any of you stopped in the kitchen, I also had neck cooling bands this last event. $15 for like 30, and 30 will cover most of your park on Amazon. Like, they aren't perfect by any standard, but you dip those in cold water and you're set for quite a while.
Would you mind sharing the link to those in the chat too?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
because
will.
those things were amazing. And like, there's so many ways to just keep yourself cool because, like, even if you're hydrated, if your body temperature is still just getting too high, it's like, yeah, you also have to keep in mind your own health with, all right, do I need to take a breather and sit in the shade and put a cooling towel on my neck and drop my temperature? So I'm not like gonna pass out on the field. Um,
The
or
big
also
thing
just
you want to
standard
keep.
cooling towels too if you don't like the big bulky guys, but still.
So the big thing you
Yeah.
also want to keep in mind, and mind you, this is a little bit less on the combat etiquette side and the fighter side. As a Reeve, understand that you're also susceptible to a lot of this. Your ass is standing out there. It is hot. It's humid. And you're probably sitting there taking direct bolts of the sun. You don't really have any real means of recourse. Keep a bottle of water there. Keep an orange if you need it. Some watermelon if you need it. Like, you would think that Reeves are not susceptible to heat stroke. I've seen it happen. It's real rough. Oh yeah, or get a big hat and sunglasses. Lord knows it helped me out. Like, it's legit. It's definitely like, be ready. But
Yeah.
on a more like class side, just to like, kind of like give an interesting little tidbit here, just to keep in mind. Positioning as a Reeve is actually kind of important. So I don't know if many of you guys saw how we were doing it for this event, but we had it kind of set up by quadrants. So Myth would be on one side, Atticus would be on another to make sure we had a war credit on each side. But on top of that, you would also have Reeves in different quadrants of the actual field itself. So you would have myself in one, Rain in another, and any other, or Fert in another if we had it, just to make sure that we had proper coverage. Because it's a big field. It's a real long field too. And especially when you have objectives that are separated by what, about 100, 200 yards, it's really rough to cover that kind of like distance. So as a Reef, especially even at your own parks, it's important that you put yourself in a situation where, one, you're not obstructing the flow of play. So like bridge battles, I've seen some Reeves will try to put themselves right near like the entrance to the bridge on the outside part of it, like where there would be your water, fire, bottomless pit, etc. You want to be a little bit further out. You don't want to obstruct play. You don't want to be able to like possibly catch an errant swing or an arrow, but you also want to be able to get a good look. I'll be completely honest. I've seen it happen way too many times where people will just, those slough shots, those slough arrow shots. You need to be able to see that. You need to be able to also have the principle of charity. A lot of shit can be going on at the same time. People are getting hit with spell balls, spells, arrows, strikes. It's a lot to keep in mind. First time, hey, keep an eye out for those spell balls next time. Next time, give a warning, put the effect on them. Third time, all them dead after the effect goes off. It's one of those things that you need to be a little bit like hard, especially with people who do tend to slough. It's going to exist. Every park has them. And sometimes it's not done maliciously. But it's be positioned so that you can get the best coverage, and be ready to lay down the law. And if somebody gives you if someone gives you sass, you have your your PGMRs for that, and you have your Warcrats for that. Otherwise, if you're at Kingdom Fields, if you're doing it at a Kingdom Field, you tell me if you need anything, and we've got you covered.
Yeah, and
So
also
be ready.
one thing that's important is to remember that, of course, one thing that a lot of players will probably just make mistakes, especially if they're one, new to playing on battlefields like this, or two, like how Sid said, there's a lot of stuff going on. For some people, it will be more difficult because, like, for example, if someone's wearing like full plate armor and a helmet, it's probably hard for them to hear the wizard who's casting an extension finger of death on them. Because, if that person's like 40 feet away and casting at them and they're wearing like a big metal helmet, they might not hear it. And one thing that, just as a random tidbit for when we start getting into like, especially with the casting system and ability system, is keeping in mind like when you're hearing those big ticket spells go off, because there are probably some of the ones that'll either get sloughed or get misused like the most often. So it is really important to keep an eye out when you're hearing them and also keeping count of them. Because, for example, if I'm playing like a healer versus if I'm playing a bard, if I'm casting 8 stuns and I'm a healer, that's not possible. Versus if I'm playing bard, then if I'm playing dervish bard and I'm just using a dagger, then I might in fact have 8 stuns, because that is the most that you would be able to get. So if I'm using like a bunch of stuns and you're hearing it go off every few seconds, it's like, hey, how come you're casting that spell so much? I might answer, oh, well, I did try to cast it earlier, but they walked out of range, so I stopped casting it. Okay, cool. Or, oh, maybe I didn't lose count. My bad. Whoopsie poopsie. Keeping an eye out for like those big ticket spells and also a lot of like the big abilities. Like Sid said, it used to be an issue with Fight After Death, and it also happens to be an issue with Rage because you get like X amount of rages in Fight After Deaths. Like I believe it's like 3 rages. They are chargeable now, but like with Fight After Death, it's like, cool, I've watched the same person use Fight After Death 6 times in this fight, and we haven't had a refresh. What's up with that? That's not chargeable. What's going on there? So that'll be like stuff to keep in mind, like keeping out for like the big ticket spells and abilities that are getting used. But overall, what some of the most important things when you're starting to get into field reeving are making sure like you're watching instead of like 2 people and making sure everyone's like, feeling okay. Now you're watching 30 people who are constantly fighting rather than like 4 people and then a bunch of people get a break. You're watching 30 people constantly fighting, constantly sweating. You gotta make sure people are just being safe. Because if people aren't being safe, and people are like passing out on the field or hitting each other in the head all the time, it's like, all right, we have to keep in mind keeping the field safe. So 1, we can run a game smoothly, and 2, so that way, like when situations arise, everyone knows what to do and it gets handled effectively. So everyone is safe. People get taken care of as they need to. And also one other thing you'll probably see a lot on fields, especially when people are maybe playing classes they're not used to, are them arguing over abilities on the field with each other. Those are situations you'll see literally all the time, where you might step in it, where you should step in as a Reeve and go, hey, what's the issue? What is the clarification that's needed? They go, well, I went to cast Ice Ball, and I threw my Ice Ball at this guy, and he's not taking my shot. All right, cool. Looks at the guy wearing a Barbarian sash. Have you considered that he is immune to Subdual? Oh, I see. Thank you for that clarification. Bye. Things like that. Or, hey, I casted Heat Weapon on this guy, and he is not dropping his weapon. And then the other guy goes, well, I'm immune to Flame. Oh, that makes sense, but your weapon isn't immune to Flame. Yes, but I'm immune to Flame, so I can hold my flaming sword. Oh, okay, cool. Thank you for the clarification. These will be things you're going to see literally all the time. But, I mean, that's mostly just also for anyone who didn't see it in the chat. Sam did drop the link to these awesome cooling tiles, so I'm going to pull them out the other screen too so you guys can see them. Mm-hmm. These things were amazing.
Can I go over a quick thing just for pre-game, like to show off how a pre-game situation might go for reading? So this is a bit of a different note. but this really does help you out as a Reeve, and it's a thing that this part, I know a lot of kingdoms don't let you do this, but it's something that makes the actual act of playing battle games a lot easier, and it makes it a lot more manageable for us. For many of you guys, when we call for a battle game, we'll say, okay, battle game, class, state the game mode. Everyone will make their primary spell lists, and then we'll get sorted out. Everyone comes to the field. Fighters to the field. Get your captains. However your team chooses to do draft, that's up to you. It's not a problem. One thing I really recommend people do, if you have the time, and especially if they have the technology to do their spell lists online or make additions or changes, let them change their spell list before game starts. It's a really, really nice thing to have because it lets players end up in a situation where they're not, kind of getting screwed because now they're on a team that doesn't really take advantage of what they have. So let them change it, check their spell list before the game, after everyone's been picked and drafted, and then let the game go from there. So you'll make, Candy Jew had chosen a team of barbarians and one warrior. I mean, back in the day, yes. Now barbarian is enchantable, so all is right with the world. But yeah, it has happened. It's happened on Kingdom Fields. You can ask Sir Higure. It happened to him, and he kind of sat there being really sad that he couldn't really do anything because most of his team couldn't be enchanted. But let's say you have everything ready. Everybody's been picked, whatever. One relevant thing, and you'll see that we sometimes do this on Kingdom Field, actually we do this a lot on Kingdom Fields here, is armor rating, so everyone knows how much armor a person has. It's like, all right, hey guys, with armor, step forward. How much armor do you have? Let's say a person is wearing a plate cuirass with pauldrons, but is wearing leather on the legs beneath the knee. Have them walk through it with you. It's like, all right, 6 points up on top, 6 points to the arm, 6 points to the knee because of the skirt, the battle skirt. But below the leg, if they choose to average or however they want to do it, they state however many armor points they're at. So if they choose to say, hey, I'm going to average down to 3 points because whatever I've got on my leg beneath the knee and what I've got above the knee averages up to a set amount, everyone knows what is going on and everyone has a relevant amount. Normally, there's not a lot of armor for this to become too cumbersome, but it also is just as useful for the opposing team to know what armor a person has and what that person themselves has, because it becomes a good check for them to keep in mind.
And also, don't forget.
The last one.
I was gonna say, don't forget in terms of armor. The rulebook is your friend because armor can be some of the more complicated things to do before a game in terms of like rating it, in terms of like what it is. Just because there's a lot of different types of armor. The rulebook is your friend. When you're reaving, the ROP is always your friend. Because look at this. Look at the construction. Look at all of this. There's a lot of different types of armor.
Isn't the rating page on what, 13, 14?
It's like 10 through like 10 and 11. Page 10 and 11.
Yes. Something like that.
Yeah. It's like page 9 through 11. This is all the armor stuff.
But yeah, the last thing I want you to keep in mind, and this is more for parks that have monsters, scenario creatures, relevant field hazards, etc. Make them clear. Let people know. Hey guys, we have this giant bottomless pit. Bottomless pit means if you touch it for any reason, regardless of state, protections, etc., you fall to your death. Or what one popular one that we have here is like pits of fire. Okay, pit of fire. What is the interaction with pit of fire and a player? Well, if the player has immunity to flame, they do not die. However, their equipment and their weapons all explode. They're destroyed. So making sure that is relevantly clear and any sort of relevant field effects or monster effects are well known to all people. So 3 things to do before a game starts, just so we can wrap it up or to summarize. Doing our spell list check after teams are drafted, makes it so that casters have a good control of what they're doing after they've been drafted onto a team, and it gives you and their team a chance to see what their spell list actually looks like. 2, making sure that armor is rated either right before teams are picked or right after teams are picked, and having those people stand up in front so everybody knows what that person is packing, and everyone knows exactly what armor means what and what is covered to where. Make them tell you where that armor goes to, just so you don't have the conversation of, hey, how far does that armor actually cover? 3, explain relevant effects. So that's either monsters, field effects, objective effects. Does that flag make you slow? Does that flag make you fragile? Does this flag or this box require 6 hands to carry? Does that monster have imbue weapon? Does that mean it has wound skill? If so, does it work as per ROP wound skill, making it always death? Like, it's one of those are the 3 big things. Oh,
You're fine.
I did not know that. Sorry about that. But yes, just something to keep in mind as a Reeve before the game starts. Make sure that relevant information is being held up. Make sure you're ensuring safety and getting all this sorted out so that the game goes nice and smooth. That way, everybody's having a good time. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I think honestly, like for now, this is probably gonna be a good spot to stop for tonight, unless anyone has any extra questions. But before everyone dips out, well, one, the battle game Reeving ones are gonna be like slightly smaller sessions, but just because like a lot of it is really dense, especially when we start getting into like how you would rule like casting situations and the weird things where our ROP isn't necessarily written in the clearest way possible. But a couple important things to remember as we are going to be continuing the battle game Reeving course is, 1, the ROP is your friend. If you ever don't know an answer, it is perfectly acceptable to say, either, hey, I know exactly where this is in the ROP. Let me look this up real quick, and I will let you know. Or also, all right, this is how I believe this ruling works. We're going to rule it as this way for right now. To keep the flow of the game going. We will double check together afterwards. That's also a fair response. Or also, like, rule situations, like, rulings change often because of how often our ROP gets updated. So there are often times where maybe someone's using a rule from a previous version, like maybe they haven't played for a while. These are things that happen all the time. So, keeping in mind that we're all kind of learning and playing this game together. And that the ROP is in fact our friend and the free resource that we get to use to play this game. So when you ever have questions, consult the ROP. If you don't understand how to read something, consult your local Reeve. Or even send a message to your local rules rep or GMR or champion and figure out what the clarification is. Another thing that we're going to cover moving forward is just we're going to go into the more dense stuff of specific scenarios. So that way it is easier to reeve them on field. I'm gonna make Kahoots because everyone loves Kahoot. Come on now. We all love doing silly little quizzes. Because there's gonna be some weird things where, there's some things that are easy. Like, all right, I started casting a spell at someone. They weren't in range when I started the incantation, but they were in range when I finished it. What happens? All right, cool. Well, yeah, they were in range when you finished it and when you actually cast the spell. Awesome. Versus other things like, all right, cool, I went to go cast a spell on someone and I said extension, but I didn't actually finish casting the spell. Did I still use my extension? Yes. Yes, you did, because you said the word extension. It's automatically used the second you say it. It's really silly. So, covering things like that in the quizzes. The next class we're going to start covering a couple of the abilities that martial classes get. So that way it's easier to reeve them on field. Then after that, we'll start breaking into the casters because even though there's less of them, they are so dense because there is so much. And then we're going to continue talking about just like refreshing on the general like safety rules, rating armor and things as we go. Like I'll personally say armor's always been the most difficult thing for me just because I always have to pull this up because I always forget exactly which number is which thing. And that's fine. You're not going to know literally everything off the dome all the time. If you do, props to you because our rules change so much, I literally don't even know how that's possible. And also, just as a forewarning, as of right now, we are using 8.6.3 SAPI 3 because that's what we're going by as a kingdom. There may be a change to that soon, depending on current voting that is happening, perhaps in July. So just keep that in mind. This may change, and this may not even be valid in a few months. But for right now, it is important that we learn this and know this and use this. But does anyone have any questions? I'm also going to stop the recording for now.